We're going to make tinctures. Tinctures are an extract of herbs or plant material that you put in a solvent or a solution that actually extracts the nutrients, and then basically what you do is you're throwing away the fiber, the bulk that's left over. Tinctures usually come in little bottles like this. It's an old-time remedy from some time ago, but this is what we consider a tincture bottle, a dropper, a brown bottle, because you want to keep your tinctures in light-sensitive bottles so that the light doesn't decrease the amount of vitamins and nutrients that are in it. And so let me show you some of the things that you need to make tinctures. The way that I make tinctures, it's at least a 2-week process. So to start out with, you would want to get some empty tincture bottles. If you don't have these kind of bottles, you can use any kind of bottles. Sometimes I'll get old-fashioned bottles and put corks in them or whatever just to make it cool. I like to use raw apple cider vinegar and vegetable glycerin. This is non-genetically modified kosher vegetable glycerin. Your glycerin needs to be really clear and really beautiful. Then this is vodka, and my friend Olga from Russia told me that the best way to pick your vodka for tinctures is to have vodka that you can't smell, that smells kind of like water. The more smell in there actually is more chemicals or processing that goes through it, and so this is good stuff that Olga made me use. I used to get the cheapest vodka because I was just extracting. There are certain herbs that work really, really well with alcohol, and alcohol extracts them wonderfully. And so we don't use it for everything because alcohol is a little hard on the liver, but in some cases like milk thistle and some herbs that are not water soluble, we will use alcohol. So this is endorsed by Olga. Then I use distilled water. Distilled water is empty water. It's water that doesn't have minerals or nutrients in it. When nature distills the water, you know, the water evaporates in the environment and goes up, and it comes back down and goes through the ground and picks up minerals, depending on what kind of minerals are in the earth in that area. And so what we want to do is we want to help put mineral into the water, because water is made to hold minerals and to help transfer minerals throughout the body, plus help transfer moisture throughout the body and help it to absorb. And so we use distilled water not only as just a base, but actually as an extracting agent itself. We use hydrogen peroxide, and you can get food-grade hydrogen peroxide and dilute it down, or you can just get it off of your pharmacy or grocery store shelf. And this is not to drink or ingest, this is just to rinse everything with, to make sure everything is clean. Even though you may wash it ahead of time, it's really great to rinse everything with hydrogen peroxide, because then there's no extra chance of having foreign objects in there. Your tinctures will last a long time if you keep the things that you use and your tools are very, very, very clean. The other thing is you're going to need some jars to be able to make it in. Now these are not light sensitive jars, but you don't have to have these be dark while you're making the tincture, just when you're storing the tinctures later on. So a few jars, and it's a little bit of a process, so sometimes it's great to do 2 or 3 at a time. You need some cups, a couple of funnels, stainless steel. I don't use anything but stainless steel or glass, because you don't want any plastics or any chemicals to leach into your product that you are making your tincture. So you just want to make sure and clean it all with natural soap and water, and then with hydrogen peroxide, so that you start out with really great tinctures and end up with really great tinctures. You're going to want to get a stainless steel colander. This is what I use because I like to press on it. Some people use a mesh strainer. I have a little mesh strainer here, but I find that I like this better because I like to be able to drain it through a cloth. And then you'll want to get a couple of stainless steel bowls to use, and a couple of stainless steel spoons, but nothing fancy, just kind of what you're using around your house. This is something you might need to go and find. This is muslin, unbleached muslin, and you can tell it by, it's got these little specks of brown in it. It's not white. There's bleached muslin, but this is unbleached cotton muslin. And so it's one of the very very best ways to strain tinctures and get the very most out of every drop, because the last part of the fiber holds on to lots of nutrients, and we're going to show you how to get that out of your product so that you have a really strong tincture. And so we use these, we use them over and over again, and they become discolored, and but they're just tools that we use over and over again and wash them really, really great. In fact, the dirtier the towel gets, the more proud my husband gets about his tinctures that he makes. And so that's what you need, just this muslin. You can get it at any fabric store or even online. But you need to wash it before you use it. These have all been washed. Wash it with a non-chemical soap, a natural soap. You've got to get the sizing out of it. You wouldn't want to use it straight from the bolt because there's chemical that was actually put on it. It would be nice to find an organic muslin cotton. But this is what we use for now, one of our tools. We also, some people use gloves. Sometimes I use gloves if I think the tincture is going to stain my hands, but most of the time I like to just wash my hands, and I'd rather have my germs in my own tinctures, and usually when I'm making them, I just make them for myself, but I don't usually want the plastic in it, so I don't usually use gloves. If you're using it, making them commercially, of course you would need to use gloves, or you would have bigger stainless steel presses and you wouldn't be straining by hand. But if the tincture bothers you, or bothers your skin, or if you're making it for other people, you might want to have some gloves hanging around. Another thing I like to have is a Mort and pestle. This is a really cool one. This is one that is actually used to break up pieces of the herbs when they are kind of too hard, and you know that the tincture's not going, the liquid's not going to really be able to get in there, and so sometimes we use this to break it up. You can use a bowl and the back of a spoon. I've done that a lot, you know, to kind of just break it up. And when you're using the herb, when you break it up, you start to really smell it, and it just kind of fills your senses when you break it up. So if you're using a whole or cut herb, then I recommend that you kind of just like crunch it up just a little bit before you put it in the bottle. And so you're going to need to get some herbs. I will be using a few different kinds of herbs, but you can get any herbs that you want. Any herb you want a tincture or make an extract out of, anything you want to extract the properties of it. For instance, if you want to use nettle. Nettle has lots of chlorophyll, tons of minerals, really terrific for pregnant women, really great for little kids that need mineral content and nutrients. Some people use it for allergy symptoms. That's a great, simple little herb. But I want you, when you guys first start making tinctures, I want you to start making single tinctures. We'll show you how to make formulas later on, but single tinctures will get you comfortable with this process of making tinctures. It's very, very valuable because tinctures can last from 3 to 10 years with over 90% potency, which is really cool. And it's very concentrated. When you take a tincture, you really feel that herb and really, really notice the effects of it. Since there's not a lot of information on tinctures and how to make tinctures, and some of this information has been lost, I always go to old books. This one's called International Library of Technology. It's from 1924. Now, the laws changed in about 1916 about what you could say about herbs and what you could not say. It's when the pharmaceutical companies kind of came in and wanted to make everything kind of under their jurisdiction. And so the herbs were kind of being done away with as kind of chemicals came on the market. But some of these old books, even though this is after 1916, still have a lot of great information. Here's some information in this particular book on extracts. It talks about all kinds of extracts there are and how to extract certain things. It talks about the powders, it talks about the different types of things that you're going to extract, and then it talks about specific different herbs in here. You can see there's Cascara sagrada, extract of Cascara sagrada in there, and it talks about belladonna, it talks about some different ones that really cool to see. And some of these old books actually have recipes and formulas in them. And you know, some of these books have the chemicals in them, some of the toxins that are used for medicines, but they refer to plants a lot, and there's a lot of great information in here. Here's another one that refers to valerian down here and talks about how to extract the valerian root, and that's kind of an exciting, fun thing to see in the book. This talks about glycerin. In fact, it says pure glycerin is clear, odorous, syrupy liquid with sweet, warm taste. And it talks about the difference and when glycerin was discovered. Glycerin was actually discovered in 1779. They've been using it as a preservative. We're going to teach you how to make glycerites the old ways, how to do it the way that you can use it with plants to be able to bring those incredible properties out of those plants into the liquid, and then you can throw away the fiber from the plant and still have that great concentrated down extract of the herb. And a lot of these old great books talk about it, and so it's kind of fun to go back and look. And a lot of the things that I learned were from some of these old books. The How-To Herb book, Little Herb Encyclopedia, some of those are really great ones for making your own tinctures and things also. But there's a little bit of misinformation, and a lot of people do watered down tinctures. And our tinctures we're going to make are raw. Now, I'm going to show you guys later on how to make decoctions and some of those other things that are not raw, but these particular tinctures are raw and have all the live enzymes still in them. So check out your old books, your old libraries, maybe at grandma's house, see if you can find some of these old books that have some great information. Some of the other places you can get information is old history books. They're always referring to plants that were used for herbal medicine. I want to show you some of my tincture bottles that I've collected over the years. This is an old one. I don't know how old it is, but it's echinacea. And it is alcohol based. It's like 58% alcohol. And then here's another one. This is Collinsonia root, and it's a tincture also. It's only 46% alcohol, but this happens to be stone root and is used for symptoms associated with vein issues and not vanity issues, but vein, like varicose vein issues. So you can look up stone root and all the cool things that it does. It's a little hard to get a hold of, so if you can find stone root, you should grab it or grow it in your backyard. Here's another extract. I love this one. This happens to be of ginger. It's a ginger extract, and that is what we use for stomachs, upset stomachs and tummy aches when we travel. We always take ginger, especially if we're going to an amusement park where Dad goes on lots of rides. Here's another one. This one's kind of fun. This is a vegetable compound. It looks like it has lots of things in it, but it also is an alcohol-based tincture, and it was sold a long time ago. This is a Lydia Pinkham's medicine. My mom used to drink Lydia Pinkham's, and she always talked about it. And so here's a shout out to you, Mom, with Lydia Pinkham's. We're going to kind of make our own. You're going to find out what herbs rock your boat, and then you can make your own formula. A lot of these formulas were considered quack medicine. And in fact, when you're looking to purchase some of these, if you search quack medicine, a lot of these things come up. But, well, this isn't quack medicine to me, but if it is, echinacea, I'm all in, quack quack, because it is great stuff for helping the body. And they knew it then, and we know it now. And so here's another one. This is swamp root. This one happens to be a full bottle of that I got. It says it helps with promotes healthy flow of urine, is what it says, but it's swamp root, so we have to look up what that is. There's lots of different names for herbs, and in the olden days they would use whatever was the local name, and so make sure you look it up. Of course, I don't recommend you drinking these 100-year-old tinctures, but it's kind of cool to look at them. So let's make some tinctures. This happens to be red clover blossoms. Terrific. It's a wonderful, wonderful plant that you can see how it literally is clover blossoms. This is a very, very powerful immune supporting herb. And what I would first do when I'm starting to make a tincture is I would sterilize everything. I washed it all ahead of time, but this is hydrogen peroxide. I just use regular hydrogen peroxide, and anything that I'm going to use that touches my herbs or my tinctures is going to have hydrogen peroxide on them. Just because, well, that's what I do. I just want to make it, you want to make it as clean as possible. You want to make sure that everything is just really, really doesn't have any speck of anything in it, because, you know, these are organic. This is organic matter. Living things rot. You know, that's how you know it's natural or not natural, is well, natural things will rot and they will spoil. But this is an incredible way to preserve and bring out the life of even the dry plants by extracting them into these liquids. So for this particular one, I'm going to use alcohol. So after I clean all of that out, let me put this over here, grab a jar. Oops, do this jar. You make sure and get every bit of it. And because we are just doing it the way Grandma used to do it, and we just use everything that's in your kitchen. I used to, now I get unbleached muslin and all of those things, but I used to use just an old dish towel because that's what my mom used. That's what Grandma used. So I'm going to take a cup of my whole, this is considered whole. You get herbs in different ways, cut, sift, or whole. This is whole, and you can kind of see the whole berry, and I'll show you some other cut, but this is the whole plant, as you can see, of the red clover. And I'm going to take about a cup of that. And when you're doing the whole plant, there's not as much surface area as there is on powdered herbs. So for instance, this herb is ground up. This happens to be echinacea angustifolia root, and it's ground up and it's very fine and powdery, and this is whole, and so you need to be able to break this down a little bit more. You can put it in whole, but definitely you see a difference in the strength of your tinctures when you break it up just a little bit, and you can kind of start to smell it. This is a small mort and pestle. Sometimes I use a bigger mort and pestle. I just kind of grind it all up. If it's really tough, sometimes I'll put it in my blender, but I'll just pulse it really softly, and sometimes a coffee grinder, but you have to be careful because it does heat the herb up, and you never want to heat up your herb to over 119 degrees because then it destroys the enzymes in it. So I'm just going to put these in here. Put this all in here. I'm not going to break it up right now, but you can kind of see, especially if it's a really hard root, it's really good to break it up and work with it. So I have 1 cup of this herb, and then I'm going to take vodka. This is one I'm going to use an alcohol tincture with. This is 80 proof, which means that it's 40% alcohol. And we talked a little bit earlier about that it's not supposed to have any smell to it. So I want to get 2 cups because it's 2 part liquid to 1 part whole herb. If it's powder, it's a little bit different recipe, but for whole herb, it's 2 parts. So here's 1 cup. Now, I can put both cups of alcohol in here. If I put 2 cups of alcohol in here, it would continue to retain the amount of 80 proof. But if I don't want it that strong, but I still want to do the extracting, I can put half alcohol and half water in. It still extracts really well. Now you probably wouldn't put water in for like milk thistle or some of the herbs that are, there's a few herbs that aren't water soluble, and so you would probably just use the straight vodka. So I used half distilled water and half of the vodka, and you mix it up, mix it all together. Now this will puff up really big. If it gets really big and fills up the whole jar, then I sometimes will add a little bit more liquid to it, but for the most part, this is it. This is a red clover tincture, started today, and in 2 weeks we'll strain this and tell you how beautiful, and show you how beautiful it is. You can see the liquid is already starting to take on the color of the plant. It's already starting to extract the amount. Now, one of the most important things that we have to do that I did not tell you when I was talking to you about the supplies is labels. I cannot tell you how many herbs that I have put together that I promise that I'm going to remember what they are, and later on I've completely forgotten what they are. So I'm going to label this right now to remember what it is. Flour, and I want to remember I did it whole, so I put a W on there, and then 2/14, the month. And oh, I want to put alcohol. and then I'll put V for vodka, and that just tells me what alcohol I used. And there we go. Make sure and label that, so you remember what that is. We're going to make a tincture of red raspberry leaves. These are actually the leaves of the raspberry plant. And I found this old box of Apothecary where they list the properties, especially good for infants and helpful in diarrhea symptoms and lots of other things in here, and dysentery symptoms. And it says the part employed is the leaves, and it tells you the family and tells you where it was harvested. This little raspberry leaves, isn't that cool how it's packaged? It's an old one. This is the current red raspberry leaves, and it smells really earthy. And it's very fluffy. In fact, for some time, you couldn't get raspberry leaves that were ground up because they're too fluffy. It's too hard to grind them. And so a great way to take raspberry leaves into your body is to tincture them and make a tea out of them. Water is used in red raspberry leaves. It's one of the herbs, like red raspberry leaves, holy basil, peppermint. Those herbs and many more seem to work really, really well in water. Water seems to enhance them. Kava kava, that's another one that works really well with water. They work well in hot beverages. They work well in cold teas. And so it's a great option to make them fresh, or make a tincture that can sit on your shelf. A glycerin tincture will actually stay on your shelf unrefrigerated for 3 years, but if you want to keep it longer than that, just keep it in the refrigerator. But you will know your tincture has gone bad if it has mold and other things growing in your tincture that do not belong there, and so you would need to throw that away. So here's the red raspberry leaves. I'm going to take a cup of it, and I'm going to put this in first. It's very fluffy. You might want to get a wide mouth jar next time if it's available, because if you're messy like me. So there's our raspberry leaves, and let's not kid ourselves. When I'm making this for myself, I rarely measure because I can tell how much is in there. So you'll probably measure for a while, or maybe some of you will measure all the time, but don't worry about it. Sometimes you need to add more liquid, sometimes you need to add less liquid, sometimes you need to add more herb. Why? Because this is a natural product, and sometimes it's harvested different times of the year, sometimes it's grown greenhouse, most of the time it's like this particular one is wild-crafted organic. They harvest different times of the year, so the leaves look different, the water content is different. Sometimes the place of harvest is a drier climate and the leaves don't have as much moisture in it, so it absorbs more of the moisture you put with it. So be very, very flexible with your tinctures. They don't have to be exact. So let's put in the liquid. So the liquid we want to put in is glycerin. This is the kosher vegetable glycerin. You need to make sure and get glycerin that is food grade, because there is glycerin they use for cosmetics, and you don't want that kind of glycerin you would get from a pharmacy. You want food grade glycerin. And so you can either take half glycerin and half distilled water and mix that together, and that will make a glycerin tincture. A glycerite is what it's called. So I'm going to do that right now. Give you half of a, let's see. Oh, actually I need 2 cups, so I need 1 whole cup of this glycerin. See how thick it is? It's just like syrup, and it's kind of that sticky sweet. It comes from vegetables, and some of my old books actually talk about glycerin, and I'll show you some of those pages where it describes glycerin and when glycerin was discovered in I think it was the 1700s. And so they've been using glycerin for extraction process and preservation. What the glycerin does is Some people don't believe the glycerin actually does any extracting, but I think it does, because you put herb just in straight glycerin, the glycerin will change color. It will pull out some of those nutrients, but the water in here is what is really magic. The water mixes with the glycerin, and the glycerin makes it so that you don't have to put preservative in this, and so that it can stay outside the refrigerator and not go bad like a tea or a decoction would go bad. This would not go bad because of the glycerin that is in it. And you would just take this tincture and shake it up twice a day for 2 weeks. This is red raspberry leaves. Remember, we are going to label them every time so that we remember. So this is red raspberry leaves. And 14, and I did this in glycerin and distilled water. So sometimes I will start a tincture and get it going, and 3 days later dip into it because I've got somebody who has a tummy ache or somebody who needs it, because it starts to extract right away. It just won't be as strong till at least 2 weeks. Now, this is what you would be called a glycerite. It's a glycerite in a lot of the old herb books, in a lot of the new current herb books. It's hard to make a real glycerite because people don't mature it long enough. It can't be matured for just 3 days to get the full potency. I see people that make tinctures and things on the market that are for kids, and they just are not very strong. And it seems like they kind of water them down. Just make your tincture as strong as you can make it, and then you can always dilute it or water it down if you need to. This is a great way to make it. It sits for 2 weeks. It does its own type of fermenting in the bottle and starts to actually get more nutrients in it than would be just if you ate the plant, because it mixes together and then a lot of microorganisms are going in there, and lots of magic is happening there. And red raspberry loves water, loves to be extracted in water. Let's make an echinacea tincture, but I want to show you the difference between the two. These are the same exact plant, but one is powdered and one is cut and sift. This is Echinacea angustifolia. It's an herb that is very much in demand, because once people discover the power of this incredible plant, they really kind of start to feel the magic of herbs, because you start to really notice a difference when you take this to help support your immune system function. And so if I have powder, let's see, throw that over there. If I have powder herb, I almost always take powder herb instead, mainly because I know the sources and I know of where I get my herbs, and you can smell it. You'll smell the root. It smells just the same. This has it smells like very, very mild dirt, I guess. And this particular plant, a lot of echinaceas that are commercially done are Echinacea purpurea, or they use Echinacea purpurea leaf, which that's a great herb. It's just not as potent as Echinacea angustifolia. So that's why I like to use this herb, because I want to get all my bang for my buck when we're using herbs to help people feel better. So in this particular one, it's a root, and so I want to make it the tincture and have it so that it absorbs really well in the body. I love to use apple cider vinegar. Some people use raw apple cider vinegar. Remember, when I'm talking apple cider vinegar, I don't mean the strained one that's clear and doesn't have any gunk in the bottom. Gunk in the bottom is what you want. This is considered the mother, and you want to make sure you have organic apples being used. And this raw apple cider vinegar is really great for helping to pull the properties of the plants out. Plus, it helps the body absorb the herbs better because it is full of probiotics and nutrients to help your body absorb better. So my new favorite way to make tinctures is vegetable glycerin, distilled water, and raw apple cider vinegar, because it makes them so much stronger. I used to just make glycerites mostly from distilled water and apple cider vinegar, but now I really love to add the vinegar because it makes all the difference in the world. In fact, so much so that my family, everybody complained, my grandkids complained about the apple cider vinegar. But if you make a tincture that's too strong to take straight in your mouth, you can always put it in some warm water or some cool water or another drink to take it that way. And when you use apple cider vinegar, You don't need as much. You don't need as much of the tincture because it actually does make the tincture stronger. So let's make some echinacea tincture. I'm going to use this powder because I want to show you how you strain a powdered tincture. Powdered tinctures are different. They're harder to strain. You really will need that unbleached muslin, especially when you're using the powder, because it's really necessary to get all the nutrients out of it, to press it really hard with that cloth. And so as you can see, the surface area is much more than this. If I was going to make a tincture out of this, I wouldn't strain it for a long time. After 2 weeks, I would probably just leave it in the jar and keep it going and going and going. In fact, I'll bring you some tinctures that have been sitting a while at my house next time. So I'm going to go ahead and put a cup of echinacea angustifolia root, one of our favorites. I make the things that I love because it's the things that we use at our house, and so make sure that you make sure and do the herbs that you know you're going to love, and don't just do it just because I'm using these herbs. Use the herbs that you love and know the most and are most familiar with. So when we're using a powdered herb, you don't need as much of the powdered herb. So I would actually need 4 cups of liquid in here. I put a whole cup in here, so it's barely going to hold 4 cups of liquid because of the powder, but I'm just going to fill it up all the way with liquid. So I'm going to put almost a cup of glycerin in here. And then if I'm making it at my house, I'm really just going to do it this way. I'm going to put apple cider vinegar in there. Yeah, you can be exacting on it, or you could just measure like you're cooking, like I like to. And so then I'm going to fill it up the rest of the way with distilled water, because the distilled water will soften the cells, make them release their nutrients, and then the apple cider vinegar will help continue the fermentation process, which makes the nutrients smaller in molecule and be able to go through the body easier. And then the glycerin helps preserve it. And so you just shake it like this, and let's make sure and write on it. We want to make sure and say what it was. So it's echinacea angustifolia root, and then I used powder, and then 14, and then I used 1/3 apple cider vinegar, 1/3 distilled water, and 1/3 glycerin, give or take. So we'll make sure and label that. Know what's going on. Some of you may want to put the actual dates, not just the month and year. I usually put my tinctures on the counter. It's better to kind of keep them out of the light, they say, but I put them on my kitchen counter kind of back underneath, so I remember every time I go by I shake them, because the more you shake them up, the more you're making the magic happen there with these tinctures. So I brought my old can of Mormon tea or Brigham tea from my mom, and this is one that we wildcrafted ourselves. Make sure and always rinse your jars with hydrogen peroxide. I used to not do it so much. I just washed my jars, my things with soap and water, but when I started using hydrogen peroxide, it seemed like they lasted a lot longer and didn't grow bacteria in them. And so, let's see. So what I'd like to do is I want to make my mom a tincture of Brigham tea or Mormon tea. And this is how you would do a whole plant. So this is very hard. It's a hard plant to grind. It can be ground, and if you buy it ground up, they've actually probably had to buy a special grinder to be able to grind it up and sell it commercially. So it's a little hard because it kind of gets stuck like twigs in the blender. It's definitely really hard to get to be smaller. And so when you have an herb like this that's really bulky, you just want to stuff your jar completely full. You want to get as much of the surface area as you can into the jar. So we just shove it full of all the sticks from it. We've already washed this. We rinse it and let it dry out after we pick it. Usually when we pick Brigham tea, we will let it stay in a paper bag for a year or two drying out, even a few months. And so I filled that up with our twigs, and I'm going to do this with alcohol because it really is great lung support. And if you use alcohol with some of your tinctures, you can put it under your tongue and help the nutrients to go through your body faster. I don't very often use alcohol. In fact, I don't use alcohol in tinctures that are usually used on a daily basis because I don't think the alcohol is good for your liver. Actually, we know it's not good for your liver. But in this case, this would be a great emergency tincture, and when she would need some support for her lungs. My mom usually makes tea at home, but on the go, this is a great solution for her. So this tincture's for my mom. I'm gonna just fill it all the way up, and guess what? I'm gonna go to the store and buy some more vodka because I want to fill this up to the top, and really, because I put a lot of herbs in there. It's starting to turn pink. Can you see that? That's what the tea turns in this little Brigham tea. It turns pink, and it's so odd because it's a brownish green plant, and the liquid turns pink. Pretty cool. Here's to your health, Mom. We made 4 really great, different, but really wonderful, wonderful tinctures that really will have incredible properties for helping the body to feel better. We have Brigham tea that helps support lung health and helps support immune health, and then red raspberry leaves, which is really great for female health, but it's great for guy health too. We give it to some young boys and even some older guys that are having a hard time with hormone issues going on. Then also, and it's highly nutritious. Red raspberry leaf is just so good for you. And then we have the echinacea, which everybody knows, echinacea angustifolia root, really great to support the immune system, and red clover, famous for immune system support also. So we made these 4 tinctures. We're going to be coming back and straining them, but I want you to dig in. I want you to get it. I want you to go in and get your hands dirty. You can't make it wrong. You can only experiment and try different things. At first, I would love for you to start to make your own tinctures, just single herbs. Don't mix formulas together unless you already kind of know what you're doing. But if you've never made tinctures before, I want you to just put one component in and figure out what kind of extract you want to make. If you want to make alcohol, if you want to make it glycerite with glycerin and distilled water. And you know what? Some people use spring water because they like the vibration of it better. But you choose for yourself. Sometimes I haven't had distilled water at my house but needed to make a tincture, so I just used the purified water that was there. The other thing that we do with our tinctures is we bless them. Remember how we talked about the food and how when you bless your food, there's a molecular change? Well, we definitely say a prayer over our herbs, and we believe it definitely enhances their quality, and heck, why not? We can use all the help we can get as far as feeling healthy and well and learning some of these old tricks. Don't be intimidated by this. Look at it as something different than chemical medicine. You got to look at this as like you're cooking in the kitchen. You're making things. You're making things for your own family to use. And these will last years and years, and your family will really love and benefit from it. Let's do an update on our tinctures. Remember, we made our tinctures last week, and they've been going for a week. So you can see this is the one that has powder in it that we used, and this is Echinacea angustifolia root. And I put a little P there for powder, so I remember that. And it's a 1/3 apple cider vinegar, a 1/3 distilled water, and a 1/3 glycerin. And so we've been going by every day, and you can tell when we've gone longer without shaking it because there's all of the herb that collects at the bottom. Now, some herbs don't collect at the bottom. This usually only happens with powdered herbs, but you really got to shake that up because you want to get all of those herbs floating through this liquid, which is the natural solvent, that is pulling all the nutrients out of the fiber. That's basically what you're doing. It's an extract in a natural form where you're throwing away the fiber or actually putting the fiber into your garden or in your compost or whatever. You're pulling nutrients that are so tantalizing in the herbs. They're the things that help your immune system function well and feel better and have energy and things like that. And so the nutrients sometimes are locked into the fiber, and it goes through when you take a whole plant. It's a wonderful experience, but sometimes it goes through the whole digestive system, and sometimes you don't feel it as quickly as you do in a tincture form. That's why this method is so incredibly powerful because it takes powerful herbs and helps them be even more powerful. So that's our echinacea tincture, and this one is our red clover. Remember, it was those beautiful blossoms and dried blossoms, and they've turned all brown and colorless. All of those nutrients go into the liquid or the solvent so that they are readily available to the body in a liquid, but also in a solvent that goes through the body faster. Like for instance, this one, the body absorbs water very well, but the apple cider vinegar also is absorbed very well and readily into the body. And also vegetable glycerin goes through the body very easily and when mixed together. This is alcohol. We all know what alcohol does. Alcohol goes through the body. Now, to use this tincture, you might want to put it in a cup of hot water to dissipate the alcohol, or taking small amounts of it is one way people take it, and absorbing it into the body really, really readily, especially herbs that you do in alcohol. You put it under the tongue and it seems to go through the bloodstream very, very quickly. For instance, herbs like lobelia and things like that you would want to have an uptake right away into the system. So that's our red clover, and this is red raspberry leaves. It has glycerin and distilled water. See how puffy this one is? Your herbs are all different. This is very, very puffy type of material, and it fluffs up. Another kind of puffy material that you would work with would be slippery elm bark, but this raspberry leaves, and you'll see the leaves were not this gray, and as the liquid gets color, the leaves change color, and kind of you just see the fiber there, and you really realize that there's really not that much nutrients left in it once you're finished with it. Then this one is our Brigham tea I made for my mom with vodka. And you can see, remember how it turned kind of pink, and now it's really, really dark and it's turned a little brown. This is wonderful and really, really beautiful. Here, let me dump some of it out and let's look at it. See, you could easily pour off the top of any of these and use them now. You can see as they change color, even in the first day, you can start to use them. So look at how beautiful that is. Oh my goodness. So an equivalent of this would be, for instance, if my mom couldn't make tea, which she loves to make tea out of the Brigham tea, she could put 5 or 6 squirts in hot water, and that would give her a type of feeling kind of like a tea without having to steep it for long periods of time. And so, isn't that great? It's going to be even darker than that when we are finished in 2 weeks. And what the heck, this is vodka. Sometimes I just let it sit for a long time. I'll pour off after 2 weeks and then just think, there's some goodness that can still come of that. Close it up, put it in my closet. Sometimes I forget to go in there and shake them and find them months later, but especially with alcohol, they will not go bad. Now, some cases, like in echinacea, I have found this, and using fresh herbs, which we haven't made a tincture with fresh herbs yet. We're going to do that later. If you leave it in glycerin and distilled water with the leaves in there, sometimes even after 6 weeks, you can find mold in there. Now, not too much if you clean it really, really well with your hydrogen peroxide, but you will find mold and things like that grow in there. So you have to be more careful leaving the leaves in anything other than alcohol-based, and even apple cider vinegar you can leave for a period of time. So I hope you guys are shaking your herbs and making tinctures that you and your family will enjoy and get into the feeling and the experience of being an herbalist.